I'm Chris Farrell from the All Things Good and Nerdy podcast, a wacky weekend morning show, part of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the show you're checking out right now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and the opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other awesome geeky shows over at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
Talk hard and enjoy the mindgasm. The intellectual podcast starts now.
Hi, Whitney.
Hi, David. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm in Canada.
Yes, you are. Enjoying Tim Hortons or some such business.
Yes, I went to a Tim Hortons when I got here to Canada. I went to a Turtle Jack's today.
Okay. Also a restaurant?
Which was really good. Yeah. My life revolves around restaurants. What can I say?
Got it. All right.
I like to eat.
So while you're away, I've been busy.
Yeah, you've been one little busy bee.
Yeah.
Buzzing around doing interviews and stuff, I hear.
I have. I've done 3 whole interviews.
So the next 3 weeks are Whitney Wegman-led solo interviews.
Yes, they are.
That's fantastic.
And should we tell the folks who our first interview is going to be?
Well, I think that's probably for the best, this being the intro to that episode and all.
Yeah, true enough. So our first interview today is for Michael Shantz, who is a local writer, director, actor, teacher. As you listen to the interview, you'll realize the man has a lot of hats. So that will be our first interview.
Well, that's fantastic. What all did you guys talk about?
Oh my gosh, we talked about Fringe Festival, which is happening right now. So if anyone wants to go out to Fringe, it has now been moved to Balboa Park. So you can check out some great shows over the next, 7 days, because it started a couple days ago. And then we talked about different shows that he's written. So like We the People is one of them. The Quote. Teaching, we talked a lot about, just all sorts of things, man. It got a little political. It's funny. His writing has delved into this political area that he never thought, would be his style, but it works really well. So he's funny.
Okay. Well, cool. Well, I'm just very curious to hear our first intellectual podcast interview that doesn't include me in the actual interview since like year 2.
Wow.
I think there was one episode in year 2 that Carla and Steve Schwartz did. I was still there, technically. I was running tech. But yeah, you're the first one to take the reins and just kind of run off and do your thing. I'm proud of you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. Let's listen to the episode and see what happens.
Absolutely. And when you're done listening to the episode, be sure to go check out the Gonna Geek Network at GonnaGeek.com, where you can catch other wonderfully geeky shows like ours, including the On the Bubble podcast. If you haven't heard it, Whitney, the On the Bubble podcast talks about shows that are on the verge of being renewed or not renewed.
Oh.
And in their most recent episode, the title's Witchblade, First Wave, and the Dresden Files, plus the role of physical items in fan campaigning. And they talk about the fact that fans of the Dresden Files sent drumsticks, First Wave fans sent salt packets, and Witchblade fans sent Pez dispensers to the networks and the studios that made those shows when they were trying to make sure they would get a renewal. But did any of those items actually move the renewal needle? Find out on the latest episode of the On the Bubble podcast at the Gonna Geek Network, of which we are a proud part.
That sounds like an awesome podcast. I'm going to have to check that out.
Yeah, me too. That one especially, because I love that. They don't mention it here in this, but the original Roswell TV show, not the new one that's on right now, but the original one, they sent little bottles of Tabasco.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need to know how to save Santa Clarita Diet, because I hear that's up for the axe and on Netflix, and I really like that show.
Yeah, me too. What could we send? We'll have to figure that out. Meatballs, little meatballs.
Little meatballs. Oh, gross. That get really gross.
But no. So check that out. But for right now, we're going to get into Whitney's interview with
Michael Shantz.
And we will see you again on another episode of the Intellectual Podcast.
All right. Bye, guys.
Hi, this is Whitney Wegman Wood here, and I am with Michael Shantz. He is a local San Diego actor, writer, director, teacher, all the hats. You wear all the hats.
Yeah, I guess so. I didn't realize it, but there it is.
So, all right, let's just kick this off by, how did you get involved in all of the crazy many hats that you wear? Where did that start?
I mean, I guess there's two incarnations. I grew up playing sports, and like most kids who played sports when they were little, they grew up thinking they'd be professional athletes. At a certain point, you realize quickly that's not going to happen. And I even, tore my shoulder cuff playing Pop Warner football, so I couldn't play high school football even. And my high school year, my freshman year in high school, I tried out for the basketball team and got cut on the last day. And then in the spring, I tried out for the baseball team and I got cut on the last day. And I thought, well, that's the end of that. And I took a drama class randomly because I liked being a goof and making my friends laugh. And sort of never looked back ever since then. Being an actor was, to me, the ultimate kind of act of art and creativity. To be able to create an entire new person was fascinating to me. And so I took it very seriously in high school. I was in community college here in San Diego at Palomar, and then I studied theater at UCI and have a BA in theater. And then I made my obligatory move up to, you choose New York or Los Angeles, and I chose Los Angeles. And I was toiling around and auditioning and, hearing lots of, that was good. I mean, we're not going to cast you, but that was really good. And you're sort of banging your head on the wall. And I was in Los Angeles at a weird time. It was like late 90s, early 2000s, when being a good actor meant you had a six-pack. And I was never good looking enough to be like the guy, and never ugly enough to be the guy's weird friend. And I just wasn't getting work. And then all of a sudden 2008 happened, and a global financial meltdown, and I couldn't feed myself. And I thought, this isn't working. And I moved back to San Diego and I got my teaching credential. So that's the first incarnation. Sorry, it's a long answer.
So wait, you're San Diego born and bred then?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I grew up here. I was born in Fresno, but I moved when I was a year old. I said, Mom and Dad, Fresno. Seriously.
And we're done. What was your high school out here?
Mount Carmel.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. Shout out to them then.
Yes, the Sun Devils, please. Home of, I just blanked on his name. He from American Idol.
Adam Lambert?
Adam Lambert, thank you.
All right.
Yeah. At any rate, I got my teaching credential. I had my own 5th grade classroom, and then I got a call to teach drama K through 8 in Rancho Santa Fe, of all places. Somebody was having a baby. And at the time I was told it's likely that she won't come back. So I thought, oh my gosh, if I could be teaching drama, that's great. At the end of the year, it turned out she was coming back, so I lost that job. But in the meantime, I had met a woman, her name's Beth Gallagher, who I know you know.
Mm-hmm.
And she was kind of just starting out as an actor. And to see how excited she was for it and her passion for it, I thought, well, I want that back in my life. And so gradually I started, just doing more and more. And she had introduced me to the Pool House Project and Kristen Fogel and Lydia Lea Real and all, anybody connected to Pool House. And we all started working together. We first started working on all city auditions, helping each other with auditions, just giving advice, looking at their pieces and advising them and directing them and that sort of thing. But we kind of did it as a collective. And then Fringe happened. And our first Fringe, Kristen was helping out with the Rooftop. And we did My Theater Nightmare.
What is the Rooftop?
Rooftop was at the time, it was sort of like the actors hangout, the club for the actors, before it moved to somewhere else downtown next to the Jeffrey.
Okay. Oh, like it's just a bar, like a hangout
Yeah.
spot. Okay.
Yeah. So in between shows, you could hang out there. And Kristen was in charge of it. And it was really cool. And she kind of organized putting on sort of miniature shows in between other shows up there, which I thought was a really cool idea. And Pool House did My Theater Nightmare. So I performed in that. And then in the next year, we did Date with Death, Hollywood Confidential.
Now, that was an original work, right?
Yeah. It was started by a young man who had worked or was going to school at San Diego State. And he had written something about Marilyn Monroe. And Marilyn Monroe's death kind of has an existing conspiracy. Because she was dead, but it looked like the bed that she was lying on had been remade or something like that. And so he had supposed that Robert Kennedy, not John F. Kennedy, was there that night, and that they were having an affair. And it kind of blossomed from there. And so we started writing other stories. We wrote one for Selena. We wrote one for Kurt Cobain, and we wrote one, Eric Castellini wrote one for Princess Diana. And they asked me to direct it. And I said, I don't think I can.
Had you ever directed at that point?
Just shows at the middle school with Beth. But my bigger worry was I having the time to do it well, because they had left it kind of short. And I wanted it to be well. And I also knew, because every summer I take kids backpacking, and I knew I would be leaving like the day the Fringe started. It was later at that time. It was like in July. And I said, I don't know that you want me to direct it, because I'm leaving and I won't be here for the run. And they said, we don't care. And I said, we're leaving it kind of short though. And, are you sure you want this? Because I might change some things.
Nowadays, I feel like that's the MO of that crew.
It really is. And it did become our MO. At any rate, we put on, I never got to see it, but what I was told was a pretty good show. And we didn't do anything the next year. Things kind of fell apart. We were going to do a Date with Death sequel, but things just kind of, fell apart, as things can happen. And then the next year we did We the People, which you performed in. And Kristen and I co-wrote that, and she directed it. And that was tough, actually, because my mom had just died. And I had gotten a call from Lydia, and she said, would you like to be involved with this show? And I said, no. I just didn't have the RAM in my head.
Yeah.
There was so much going on.
Well, and it wasn't like a little endeavor, because between Lydia, Kristen, and I, we had interviewed like 100 people.
And I think it was you three had started it with the interviews, if I'm correct, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But then you and Kristen having to boil and distill it down, which...
Right. So at some point, Lydia had asked if I wanted to be involved, and I said, I just don't think I have the time. And Kristen called me back and said, I need your help. And I'm a people pleaser, and so I just felt like I had to do it. And it was actually the best thing for me. And as I started writing, it was actually a friend of yours, I believe, who was an alderman in D.C., correct? Yep. And he was out to his constituency as gay, if I have that correct, but not as a drag queen or...
Well, so they actually, he's people know.
Okay. All right. But the story we weave was his kind of coming out as the constituency, and I was working on that and distilling what you had interviewed from him into a piece. And I do remember thinking, man, I'd like to perform this, But I honestly just didn't think I could at the time, because it would have been a massive undertaking to do it well. Unfortunately, or actually fortunately, Kristen maybe a week later said, I think you should do that role.
Yeah.
And I went, I don't have the time, And I hemmed and hawed, and she said, you have to do it. And I said, I know, you're right. And I did, and it was the best thing.
You did a great job. It was fantastic.
It was a great project. I thought the whole thing. I thought everybody.
I sent it to my friend who was the inspiration for that.
Is that right?
And he really liked it.
Oh, that's so great.
Yeah.
Well, that makes me feel really, really good.
He thought it was neat that a character was, based on him.
Yeah, that's good.
And of course, having grown up in Missouri, even though it wasn't, he's very much out now, I'm sure that process, if you look back on it, that character is more closely to align, with the origins.
Yeah, sure. Because everybody's going to have that story in one way or another.
Yeah.
coming out to your family, coming out to your friends, you know, and I can only imagine, you know, the difficulty behind that, especially if you're living in somewhere like Missouri or somewhere not as progressive as we are here in San Diego, California.
Exactly.
Not that people in San Diego don't have their prejudices either.
That's true.
It's everywhere.
That is true.
Which we're learning now thanks to, you know, who's in office.
Yeah.
The depth of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Oh, man, on my drive in, I was listening to NPR. I should never do that. It's just damn depressing sometimes.
You know, I like two of my best friends have kind of retreated as well. They said we want to think positive and we're just not listening to as much news and we're off Facebook. And I'm just trying to do both. Like, I want to stay informed and I think it's important that we do, but I'm able to sort of let it go. I'm more zen about this presidency than when George W. Bush got elected, I mean, I went bananas and was, you know, making rants on Facebooks to my friends. And a lot of my friends are conservative and they're like, hey, you're being kind of a dick. Like, you know, and I just remember when, you know, I like thinking about it now, I would gladly take George W. Bush back.
Wouldn't we all?
For all his faults,
we all?
The man at least understood the conventions of the presidency and he cared.
Yeah.
He was making decisions based on what he thought was right and not for himself. I didn't agree with those decisions and I had plenty of mistakes, but they're at least honest mistakes, and I don't see that in this presidency. So
yeah, I mean, so that kind of ties into exactly what we were talking about with We the People. I mean, the reason that we did that show and the reason you got involved. How did you feel about doing political theater? Do you do that a lot in your?
I'm sort of just, you know, in the last few years we've started to, and I must say you know, I've gone from one end of the spectrum to the other. We the People, Kristen Fogel and I talked at length about that show and how proud we were of that show and the kind of dialogues we thought that show could generate.
And it did generate.
Yeah.
There was a lot of conversation in our talkbacks and people coming up to us afterwards saying, you know, it's just so nice and refreshing to have a show like this at this time.
Yeah, exactly. And we seem to be, you know, whether it's through Pool House Project or with Kristen Fogel leading Pool House Project, the show I'm doing right now, Tom Stewart of Whistle. Oh, I just blanked. Tom, I'm sorry.
Whistle Stop, right?
Yeah. Okay. Whistle Stop Productions. At any rate, they're more politically driven. So we did We the People, and I thought it was a really strong show that generated plenty of great conversation. And I guess it was the next year we did The Quote.
Which also was political.
Yeah.
Political historical.
And it just sort of, it was a fictional account of taking a look at a historical moment. Because in our first show, Date with Death, we kind of had a couple of filler scenes, like scene-changing scenes, so that we could change out the scene and the curtain would close and a couple of people. And the story, you saw these two characters 3 times over a period of like 40 years. And it was an editor-in-chief of a newspaper and one of his reporters. And it was their relationship and their kind of the way they viewed certain things and the role of news. And they were only 2-minute scenes. And I liked the idea behind it, but I never thought I didn't think I had written it very well, and I didn't think I gave it as much attention as it deserved.
So wait, you were a writer on Date with Death as well?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize you were writing that far back.
Yeah, I wrote, I helped to write not the Kurt Cobain, the Selena scene.
Okay.
And then I wrote the scenes in between, the filler scenes.
Yeah.
Too, yeah. But those scenes, the idea behind it I thought was good, but it was not, there was something missing. Mm-hmm. And it always just kind of stuck in my mind. And Kristen and I had talked, as early as December about Fringe in the summer, and that we wanted to do something together. And she had, right around then she had gotten married, and I believe she was on her honeymoon. And she said, when I get back from my honeymoon, we need to talk, because we got to get started now, because we're always starting late, and let's get started early. So I said, that's a great idea. And what ended up happening was over the next 2 weeks, I wrote the first draft of the quote. Because I kept thinking about those previous scenes I had written and the idea behind them and the role of news media in our culture and how it had changed. Because I remembered Gary Hart, and I remembered that he had announced his presidency in sometime in April, and it turned out it was like late April, and he was out of the race in the first week of May.
Wow.
Because he'd had an extramarital affair, and that was enough.
Yeah.
For the electorate, that was enough. You're cheating on your wife, you're done. And in our current election, in our last election, a man was not even accused. He just bragged about grabbing people and kissing them and doing whatever he wanted.
And well known for having extramarital affairs.
Exactly. I mean, he already had been married twice and divorced twice based on his cheating habits. And it didn't matter to the electorate anymore. We'd become so polarized that it didn't matter. But what I was curious about more than anything was, when did news shift? When did the paradigm shift of how we covered presidential candidates shift? And I thought to myself, was it Gary Hart? Because that seems really late. It's like 1987, for the 88 election, but it happened in 87. And I said, it must have happened before that. And I started researching, and all of a sudden it was like, that was the moment. And it was the Miami Herald. In our story, we fictionalize it. It's a paper in DC, but the Miami Herald is the paper that was, they'd received a phone call, an anonymous tip that a woman would be going to DC and be going there to see Gary Hart and that they were having an affair. And they sent a reporter to the airport just to look at people going on to flights to Washington. And one of the reporters saw a woman and said, looks like her. Got on the plane with her, followed her from the airport, and she went directly to Gary Hart's townhome, and in she went, and they kind of staked out the apartment, the townhouse, like they were detectives. And newspaper reporters really didn't do that sort of thing until that moment. Yeah. And there was plenty of in our early, early politics, there was lots of nonsense.
Kennedy and Marilyn Monroe, like that was.
But that's the difference. I'm talking like in the 19th century, in the 1800s, they did plenty of terrible things. But in our modern political climate, every reporter knew that John Kennedy was having affairs, but they did not deem it their purview to comment on it at all. They said that was his private life.
What sort of makes me think of, I've been watching Deadwood recently.
Me too.
Did
you watch the movie?
I did. I
think every frame of it is just amazing.
Yeah.
But I digress.
But the fact that Hearst, right, he did terrible things, and the newspapers never said a word about it because, he stifled the media, of course. He'd just have you killed.
Yeah.
But, I'm sure it comes from that idea that, that golden era of people were untouchable at first because, they'd have you murdered flat out, and then because, they're beyond reproach.
Mm-hmm. But what it speaks to more than anything, and it's still relevant today, is privilege.
Yeah.
Privilege of the rich, privilege of the white, and all the things that come with that privilege, to the point where Donald Trump is, just openly saying, I can do whatever I want.
Yeah.
I can shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and nobody's going to care, That's a lot of privilege.
Yeah.
And up to this point, it appears that he's right about that. People wouldn't care. So I wanted to tell a story about that paradigm shift. And I wanted to tell a story about, good people that have good intentions who are arguing about the merit of it. And that's what became the quote, which was, a politically generated show. And again, it was well received. A lot of people didn't see it at the San Diego Fringe, but, of course, we took it to the Tucson Fringe and we won a best ensemble there.
Well, and I think, at least one of the comments that I heard a lot was, even though it came from this political concept, the show itself was not political, right. Because
it's about the people.
Yeah, there were no sides being taken. Mm-hmm. Anyone could have watched the show, no matter what their political standing is, and they, would have probably agreed with it. It's like discussing
Right, because the characters were arguing the merits.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's morality. It's not political policy.
But in a time where we're being told that, the media is biased and that the media is left wing and that the media, that there's some sort of deep conspiracy, and the people that do those jobs, they take their objectivity really seriously. And many of them, there was a great docuseries on Showtime, I believe it was Fourth Estate, and they followed the reporters from the New York Times for a year in the first year of the Trump presidency. And you see, some of them comment how they have not voted in a presidential election in, 15, 20 years because they want to stay objective just for that reason. And so I was curious about telling that kind of story about people that cared that much about the role that news media has in our society. It's cool.
What do you want to do with that show now? Because obviously it's gone to a couple of fringes, and Chris and I, we were even talking this year about taking it to the Los Angeles Fringe, which I believe is in July. Yeah, that's really soon.
Yeah, after we had done another show that's not necessarily politically, doesn't surround a political life, but surrounds sort of Me Too. We did a show called Blackbird by David Harrower, which is an extraordinary piece of writing, and has to do with a 55-year-old man who finds himself in a room at his job with a 27-year-old woman, and they haven't seen each other for 15 years. And 15 years ago, they had an illegal relationship. If you do the math, he was 40 and she was 12. And it's a pretty stark and difficult look at things we don't like to look at, if you're being honest about it, and trying to find the humanity within it for both characters, which is, I think David Harrower is able to do, and that's pretty extraordinary. At any rate, we had finished that show and looked at each other and were like, we can't. Because I knew I was planning something for the San Diego Fringe with Tom Stewart, and I said, we can't do that. And we wouldn't do it justice if we took it there. So maybe next year.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, so speaking of that, so you have another show coming up in the Fringe, which opens tomorrow.
Yeah. Tomorrow night, 7:30.
Yeah.
Come on out.
So May 6th. Where are you? What's your location?
June 6th.
Oh, June. Yeah, it's June. It's June.
It's
Good
June.
Lord. June 6th. It is June already. What's your location?
The Mary Hitchcock Puppet Theater.
Okay.
I think I have Hitchcock right. It's in Balboa Park. The entire Fringe Festival has been moved to Balboa Park.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Which is new for them. It's really small this year. There's only like 20 shows. Last night, Kevin kind of runs it, the San Diego Fringe, and he was explaining because they were moving it to Balboa Park, they wanted to kind of make it small this year to see how it works and what's going on with
how
Fringe.
People receive it.
Yeah. So it's sort of an experiment for them. And I'm just thankful we're one of the 20 shows.
Yeah, that's
so
great.
We start tomorrow.
And how long does the entire Fringe run, and then how long does your show run?
We have 5 shows, and I believe it runs to June 14th, if that's a Sunday.
Maybe.
It's either June 14th, 15th, or 16th.
I'm clearly not the person to ask. Yeah. I still thought it was May.
True. But at any rate, it runs about 10 days, the Fringe Festival. And one thing that, I was apprehensive at first when I found out. Kristen Fogel actually told me yesterday that it was only 20 shows, and I went, oh, no, because usually there's 50 or 80 or 100 shows.
I have to go through and be very selective about my time.
About what you can see.
Yeah,
and with 20 shows,
schedule.
I thought, maybe I can see all of them. That's a possibility. So that, I thought that was at least interesting, that I could try to see everything. But it'll be interesting to see what happens this year with Fringe in a new place, and what kind of, because there's a lot of foot traffic in Balboa Park. So people just walking by might, be able to see shows. So
yeah, that's one thing in past years I've noticed, like down in Horton, I'd be running around with my big fuzzy hat and my Fringe shirt and everything, and people would be like,
look at you strangely.
Yeah,
like, what's going on?
And I'd stop and tell them if I had time, if I wasn't running to catch a show, and they, oh, what's that? And
they have no idea.
They have no
idea.
There's
signage everywhere.
Exactly. They have no idea
it's just like they're moving through their life and they don't know.
Although I did get a few people to come to shows at random, so
well done.
But yeah, I think maybe Balboa would be a better venue just because people are there to do things and they are, aware that.
And there's just, plenty of foot traffic.
Right.
And
yeah.
If they have been walking around but want to take an hour to sit down, you could sit down and watch a show.
Yeah.
So I'm interested to see what happens.
So, what are all the venues like the museums then, or where?
I actually don't even know. One of the things I found out last night was they are going green this year. They do not have programs, and
it's all online.
Yeah, but you have to kind of. They don't have like a program online yet. I think that they're going to try and do that in the years to come. But you have to go to the SD Fringe site and then click on tickets, and then all the shows come up, and so you could just kind of scroll through it and see what's where and that kind of thing. But yeah, no programs.
That's kind of nice.
Yeah.
Everything can be run by your phone anymore, so it's perfect.
Yeah.
So, all right, so you guys are doing a show.
We are.
What the heck is this show about?
We are doing Space Force. And, earlier you had asked me about political shows, and I think I might have referenced the idea of the gamut that we've run between We the People and, say, The Quote to Space Force, because Space Force is still a bit of a political show, but it's ridiculous. It's a farcical comedy. I mean, it's really, really silly. The front of the story takes place in the year 2103. There's a small group of underground rebels at the CNN underground double secret probation base. And they are about to make a TV show. They have rescued a caravan from Mars that was going to go to the Trump moon labor camp. And this caravan is going to be the live studio audience for the show they're taping.
Awesome.
And the show they're taping is one they wrote themselves and is based on a real case file from Space Force from the year 2073. And so they thought it was the best case possible to show how corrupt Space Force and Donald Trump is, or are. And
because he's still alive in this
he is still
future.
alive, yes. So what happens is he wins re-election in 2020, and I got to get my dates right. I want to say somewhere around the year 2024, he declares himself president for life. And in 2048, he becomes Planet President Trump after he cuts off his own head and sinks it to Twitter and keeps it alive in a jar of homogeneous life force jelly from his daughter's womb.
All right.
Yes.
And having scanned the script, you guys find all this out within the first couple of minutes, so we're not really spoiling anything.
Correct. Yeah. There's a lot of exposition in the first 6. Yeah, there's a lot of exposition in the first 6 pages. And, we kind of wrestled with it because, and basically it's just a joke because you have to explain to the audience as if they don't understand what happened in the last, So they explain what a live studio audience is and that it was really popular in the last century, for television programs. And these people don't even know what a story is. So they have to, they explain quite a lot, and they kind of set up, do a lot of world building and that kind of thing in the first, 5-6 pages. Yeah.
So you guys had previews last night.
We did.
What was the response at previews?
It was really great, I must say. One of our characters is basically a CGI alien. Well, I guess I'll just go ahead and tell you. I was going to say maybe I shouldn't, but the way it works out is the supposed live television audience where we're beaming the story out to would see him as an alien. The live studio audience in the theater will just see him in a green suit with tennis ball or ping pong balls attached to his suit. And just him walking out, people started laughing, which was really nice. And we did a car chase scene. And I'm happy to report there was sort of spontaneous applause upon our ending. So
Yay!
I'm excited that people will find it as amusing as we do.
Spontaneous applause is always good.
Yeah.
All right, so it's been well received thus far. What was the process in getting to this story? Like, who pitched this idea first, you or Tom? And
Space Force was my idea, and I had talked to Tom about it, and because Tom and I had done Lone Star together years and years and years ago.
I'm unfamiliar with that one.
It's kind of one part of a two-part play, down in the home in Texas, or I forget. But Kristen and Lydia Lea Real and Kendra Truitt, Kristen Fogel, those three performed the female half, and then Tom and I were in, and the characters are kind of like.
Oh wait, is that the? No, I'm thinking of Laundry and Bourbon. Never mind.
That's the one.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
That's the show. That's the female part.
Oh, I didn't realize that it was a complementary pieces.
They're complementary pieces. Tom's character is married to Kristen's character. And at any rate, and this was years and years and years ago. It was sort of my first show coming back after, the hiatus of 2008 and all that. And working with Tom was just a dream. And I've been wanting to try and find a way to get us back together for a long time. So I said, Tom, Space Force. And he said, oh, okay. And so we had a couple of initial meetings, and we started blocking out story ideas, and we decided we would write it together. And then, all of a sudden I got a call from Kristen Fogel, and she said, I want to do Blackbird now. She was going to do it in December. And she said, but I'm thinking I'd like to do it now. Are you in? And I said, of course I'm in. And then I said, Tom, I'm doing Blackbird. It's going to be a lot of work. And he said, it's all right. We can still do it, and blah, 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 blah. And what we ended up doing was sort of writing separate drafts. And then we had a meeting and talked about the things we liked most, and they kind of brought them together. Both drafts.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of working.
Yeah, it was. And it didn't, it had its hardships, because we both had written things that we loved. And
you're like, but this has to be, 45, 50 minutes, right?
Right. And so, but, in the end, even though we had some growing pains and even some difficulties, in the end, I'm just so pleased and happy with what we have. And I think it's just a great, great version of, all the ideas.
Well, and now if you ever wanted to make it longer, you have the excess
we have plenty
material.
of other stuff. Yeah.
Lots of bits.
I mean, we could, really, really take off with it.
I guess it depends on how it's received at Fringe. Do you have any thoughts looking forward that this might be a longer piece?
I have no idea. Yeah, for one, we'd have to see, I'm really curious to see what happens with this show, because although it's like just ridiculous, and there is an undercurrent of, we're talking about the things we're dealing with right now with this current president. And we're also dealing with what happens if he goes unchecked. I honestly believe, even if he loses 2020, which I think is a more difficult thing to happen than most people think.
Yeah.
It's hard for a president to lose or to not gain a second term nowadays. But if he loses that election, I think there's an honest to God chance that he says, I'm not leaving.
Tough shit.
Yeah. He's going to scream foul and cry foul, and he's going to start floating ideas about why he should stay in office. I really believe that. And so at the end of the day, I don't think that will happen. He's going to, if he loses that election, he'll leave office, but how he leaves office is like really up in the air. Like, is he being dragged out by the army?
Well, and furthermore, the division's already been sown. Like, no matter what, we still have some serious social issues that need addressing in mending
right.
our cultural interactions, let alone our political.
Sure.
So, yeah. But that comes to play in the play.
It does, but in a ridiculous way. It's one of those things where you can just sit and just enjoy the ride. And my hope is that when you get home, you're going to think, there was a little more to that than I think I was looking at, essentially. And it's, it's kind of a breakneck pace, and there's at least some sort of joke in almost every line or two, and the jokes come fast and furious. And so I'll be interested to see like what people get, what they find amusing, and what flies over their head because we're moving at a certain pace, or I'm curious to see.
This might be a multiple viewing sort of play to catch.
Maybe, I don't know. It's because on its face it's very simple. It's very straightforward. And it's just silly. But it's only in retrospect I think that you'll find more to it.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Parody's great for that.
Yeah.
Well, all right. So Fringe is coming up for you. What's after Fringe, or are you just like vacation?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely, I take, I'll be hiking, I'll be backpacking in July. I take trips every summer and take kids backpacking generally from Mammoth to Yosemite. And so I'll enjoy that time off. And then I'll come back and we'll see. I know that Kristen and I have been talking about possibly my directing something for December. And there are some things I might want to put my hand into, or get at least audition for as an actor that I heard about recently. But right now I'm just sort of tunnel visioned on getting through Fringe and then maybe I can breathe for a moment, because it's been a lot since January. I've been going kind of 100 miles per hour nonstop.
Yeah, there's no life outside of Fringe.
Yeah, exactly.
So one thing that you mentioned that we haven't really touched on is, you teach.
I do.
You want to plug some of the places that you teach, or talk about where people can have you as an instructor if they're interested?
I'm a little bit different I'm a hybrid. I'm a credentialed teacher. When I moved back down here, I went to a credentialing program, and I'm credentialed. But I love drama and theater, and I love the idea of kids being exposed to drama and theater, or all arts, and they don't have it nearly enough, and they should. But it's always the first thing cut. When you run out of money, arts is the first thing that goes, and it shouldn't be, because there's plenty of statistical evidence to show, not even suggest, but flat out show, that kids who learn through the arts learn better.
And retain it.
And retain it better, yeah. So I started working for Arts for Learning, and I have just started working for the La Jolla Playhouse, both who have different programs giving arts to kids. And I just love it. I think it's, I think what I believe is that all people should in one way or another be in service of others for something in some point of their lives. And for a lot of my life, that was just backpacking. Like I could, take kids backpacking and show them what they are capable of, and show them things that most people don't get to see, and have them do things that most people don't get to do. And I consider that, worthy of giving service to others. But being able to serve the San Diego community in this way has really kind of filled my heart in a really different way. Because to see the effect it has on kids. I got a note from a kid the other day that, my time with them was ending, and she had written me a note that said, I used to be really nervous just standing in front of people, and now I'm not, and it's because of you.
Aww.
And the games we played. And I thought, oh man, and it just gets you right in the cockles. And it's so important that we have more of it and not less of it. And that's one of the things I'm most proud of in working with Arts for Learning and La Jolla Playhouse. La Jolla Playhouse is really the model that they are going with is to really have not just kids exposed to arts, but the teachers who teach them exposed to arts. And the teaching artists come in and plan with the teachers. And at first they're doing the classes. They have an arts academy is what it's called. And instead of spreading it around, 6 weeks at a school here, 8 weeks here, that kind of thing, and just going from school to school, they try to put all their resources into a school. And it worked so well that for not this year, but last year, Lydia Lea Real, our friend, she was working for La Jolla Playhouse, and she was working at a school for Arts Academy. And essentially she comes in and she starts writing lesson plans with the teacher, and she's teaching the kids. And eventually by the end of the year, the teacher is taking over. Yeah. And they are putting arts into every single lesson. And so that school made the commitment to put arts in every lesson in every classroom. And it worked so well that Washington, D.C. got involved. The Kennedy Center, which has
oh, that's wonderful.
A really remarkable program apparently for teaching artists and for teaching arts to kids. They came in and they made the commitment to put all the money in for the school. And that school transferred to their program at the Kennedy Center. And I can't remember the name of that program offhand, but essentially like somebody will come in every year and focus on something with the kids. And it's usually somebody famous. It might be a musician and they donate a bunch of instruments. It might be an actor and they donate time or whatever it is. But that's sort of the creme de la creme of a program. And that school made it because of the work of.
So in that case, because, they've basically graduated into this Kennedy Center program, does La Jolla then pair with a different school each year, or?
Yeah, they have branched out and they're at a couple schools now. And I'll be starting, it was hard to work out schedules because I was doing so much for Arts for Learning in San Diego as well. But I believe in September or October, I'll be starting in the Arts Academy program. And I'm doing something for them this summer, teaching, like just substituting for somebody who's,
So for either of these programs, if someone listening, is a teacher or is involved with a school, where do they start for getting this on board at their school?
I would certainly contact La Jolla Playhouse or Arts for Learning. Resources are also, it's still difficult, in the sense of you probably can't just call and say, hey, come on by. But it's the sort of thing, because Arts for Learning right now is primarily working in like National City, El Cajon, less so. They did a lot in San Diego Unified and less now. And La Jolla Playhouse is sort of, in the same vein of National City and El Cajon, or not El Cajon, but National City and other districts. But it's like as far as, if you wanted to get involved as a teaching artist, definitely contact Arts for Learning because they actually have a program to, I forget, I think it's a couple of months.
Yeah, where you actually get trained up. I worked for Arts for Learning as well, so yeah, they have.
And I went through that program, even though I was credentialed. But,
there's a couple different variations, depending on where you're wanting to be placed and what type of teaching.
And because it's for all disciplines too. It's not just theater. The great thing about Arts for Learning is. They also have teaching artists for art. They have teaching artists for dance. They have music. They have everything. Yeah. And so kids can be exposed to all the arts, which is fantastic. And to see some of the work that the teaching artists do through that training program is just remarkable.
Well, it's fascinating the pairings you get, because you have like visual arts as paired with math as a discipline. Right. And you don't always necessarily think, but then you see it's like, oh, yeah, no. And that makes sense because it's this tactile application that the kids can be like, oh, math is not just abstract. Look.
Exactly, yeah. And I get that all the time from teachers like, math and science. What am I going to do with theater for math and science? But personification and storytelling can still happen, whatever it is. If you're working on a graph and you have to move over 2 and you go up 4 or whatever it is,
Yeah, physicalizing it.
Yeah. And, make the number 2 and make the number 4 characters and tell their story of, where they have to travel. They have to travel past one. How's one feel about that? I mean, you could do anything with enough imagination. And that's one of the things I always impress upon the kids in my classes. We talk about the actor's toolbox, and depending on their grade level, we talk about using your face, using your voice, using your body, and your imagination. And I always have 1, 2, 3, and star. And the 1 star does imagination. And I ask them, why do you think the imagination has a star? And they get on it pretty quick. They're like, because the imagination's so important. You go, that's right. Because your imagination is in charge of all these other tools. If you can imagine what somebody's voice sounds like, if you can imagine what their face would look like based on how they're feeling, if you can imagine how their body would move based on what they're doing, you can become a different person. And then I show them Shaggy from Scooby-Doo, that kind of thing, and show them how you become a different person, just kind of, quickly, and they all get it right away. You're Shaggy. What's his name? Shaggy. That kind of thing. And it's really fun. I mean, it's really rewarding work.
That's great. You light up. It's
cool.
I know this is an audio show, so you guys can't see, but yeah, Shantz just absolutely bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, lit up like he just drank a cup of espresso. It's heartwarming.
It's great. I mean, it's great work, and you see the difference that it makes in their lives, and you realize that the games you show them, they come up and tell you, I taught my sister, or I taught my brother, or I was teaching mom and dad that game last night. And, a lot of times I'm in classes for, just 6 weeks. And on that 6th week, I'll say, okay, now this is our last day. Let's make it a good one. And you just hear, no. And it's just really rewarding work. I mean, even I was working for Luminary Arts, which is run by Bruce Blackwell. And he's just a wonderful, wonderful man. I've known him for years. And I was working in San Marcos at a school. And, my first year there, I had a kid in my class who, he's the kind of kid where often on a, weekly basis, a bi-weekly basis, or at least once a month, 4 adults would have to come in the room and each grab a limb and kind of carry him out of the room, based on behavior problems. And he came into my class, and the first day I said, okay, we're going to learn our actors warm up. Everybody stand up. And everybody stood up at him. And I said, are you joining us? And he just kind of scowled and shook his head. And I said, okay, we'll try again next week. Because if you fight with that kid, you'll lose him forever. It's just, you can't do that. So at any rate, every week I'd say, all right, let's stand up and do our warm up. And he'd sit there. I go, today? And he kept saying no for, 3 or 4 weeks. Finally, on the 5th week, he just stood up by himself and he started doing the warm-up. And he did the warm-up every week from there on out. And I even got him to volunteer. He didn't do a lot in my class, but he was never a behavior problem for a single second in that class. And he is a behavior problem in other classes, And I think that's one of the things that's great about the arts, that this kid could come in and he knew that I understood him and I kind of had his back and it was okay. And he even, one day he raised his hand to perform in an improv scene. And I was like, quick, get up here before you change your mind.
Yeah, right.
And he did it. And he did, that was really one of the only times I had him write monologues based on their own life. And he did write a monologue. Unfortunately, he was testing the day we were performing them. So he probably wouldn't have performed it, but I would have liked to have given him the opportunity. But he was moving, I believe, to Texas. And on the last day of school that I was there, he was also, every time I see him in the hallway, he'd give me a high five. And his aide used to say, that's kind of a big thing for him. Like, he doesn't really do that. And I'd say, hey, Joe. I'd give him a high five. And the last day he was there, he gave me a high five. And he walked about 10 steps past me. And I heard, Mr. S. And I turned around and he goes, I'm going to miss you.
Aww.
And for that kid, he had done almost nothing in my class, but I still was able to build a relationship with him, so much so that he was willing to take an emotional risk and tell me something like he was going to miss me.
You. Yeah.
And that's a huge thing for a kid like
that.
And I don't think it's anything extra or special that I've done. I think it has to do with the arts. I think it has to do with a kid being exposed to the arts and seeing that expressing your feelings is okay. And a drama class is a safe place to do that.
Yeah.
So it's important.
It's important for society.
Yeah.
Well, okay. We've actually almost come to the end of our time, believe it or not.
Well, it's been lovely.
Yeah, I mean, it goes so fast whenever you're like fired up about what you're talking about. So I actually do have one other question, but two things. So one, looking forward at your career, what would be like your pie in the sky? Like, what is your dream, your big fish? Like, if I could do this, that'd be awesome.
I've been thinking about that recently, and I can even almost say that I did it in one sense. What I wanted more than anything this year, particularly, I wanted to be more challenged, especially as an actor. And so when Kristen Fogel came to me with Blackbird, which was the biggest challenge of my life as an actor, that's what I wanted. And you don't get a lot of opportunities, or all the years I said I was spending in Los Angeles and being told, nice, but no thank you. But knowing that you're putting the work in. So at any rate, when I finished Blackbird, the moment Blackbird was done, I remember having a conscious thought that I felt like a professional actor. Not that I was, paid a lot to do the show or anything like that. It didn't have to do with monetary or that kind of thing. But it was
the work.
But it was based on the work. The work I did, I felt like, was at a professional level. And that was what I wanted and wanted to have the opportunity for. Because, if you don't know the show Blackbird, just know that, doing it every night was like climbing Mount Everest every night.
Yeah, it's gritty and emotional, and
I mean, it's difficult. And my scene partner, Kimmy Weinberger, was just an astounding actor, and really dedicated and so fantastic and so giving. And both of us start off at a certain level when the show starts. And I equated it at one of the talkbacks to feeling like you're a tank of gas and you're full, but by the end of the show you're on empty and you don't believe you could do it again the next night. But you trust in your process and you trust that the work you put in will be there, and when you are there the next night, you are ready and the tank's full again. And that was a great feeling. And so I think what I'd want more than anything is to continue that, to in all work. Whether it's something silly like Space Force or whatever it is, I want to give it my all.
Nice.
Yeah.
Finally, if people want to get a hold of you as a director, a writer, a teacher, an actor, any of the many hats, how do they get in contact with you?
You can email me. I'm probably one of the few people still using Yahoo, but there you have it. It's Kidshancy at yahoo.com. KIDSHANTZIE at yahoo.com. That's probably the best way.
All right. We'll drop that in the, so they don't have to spell it out. We'll just put it in.
Yeah. It's a lot.
Well, thank you so much for doing this interview.
Thank you for the opportunity. It was great.
Have a great fringe.
I intend to. I hope so. Yeah, it should be great.
All right. Talk to you later. Goodbye, everybody. Lovely people. And I'll talk to you in, I guess, another week. Bye, guys.
Hello there, citizens. I am the terror that flaps in the night. I am the floaty that will not flush no matter how many times you try in the toilet bowl of crime. I am Darkwing Duck, telling you, please, talk hard and enjoy the mindgasm. Whatever the heck that means. After all, you are watching Intellectual Podcast with your ears.